if Roe is reversed, an American woman in need of an abortion may be able to get one only in states that, yes, have legal abortion, but also engage in affirmative care, again with the air quotes, scare quotes, affirmative care for children who declare themselves to be the opposite sex. But notice, not having affirmative care for children who declare themselves to be tractors or umbrellas, rainbows. So affirmative care only for the briefly sex-confused children will be available in the same states where abortions are available. And it may also be those states where parents don't have parental rights if their children decide to start transitioning socially at school, for instance. And if the parents resist this batshit nuttery, then they are potentially in themselves in breach of law. All three of those things, one of which, the first, abortion rights with limits, I am absolutely in favor of, somehow go together now. Somehow, and then we will have states where none of those things are likely to be possible. And I wouldn't want to rank these things in terms of their importance, and yet I find it to be a particularly egregious and insane moment that we find ourselves potentially in that situation, choosing between states that have in which those are the options. A child conceived by rape, it is argued, did nothing wrong. The child should not suffer suffer for the sins of their father. Is how the saying goes, I think, unless I butchered that, which I think I didn't. So the child should not suffer for the sins of their father. But the woman who was raped should not suffer for having been raped. Right? So this is actually a kind of moving the punishment on, moving more punishment onto someone who has already been actually victimized. And of course, any language about victim and victimhood and victimization has become so badly destroyed by the insane conversations that are happening on what I insist on calling the pseudo left of late, that it is hard to do this and know that I or we will be able to get the careful attention of people on the right, because the people on the right, people on, say, the other side of the abortion issue, or just in general, who say, you know what, no, I'm conservative. You know why? Because the left, until on May 2nd, 2022, this opinion was leaked. So many on the left were gleefully pretending that men could turn into women and women could turn into men. And they all know they can't. They all know that's not true. Like, maybe there's a tiny fringe of people, and I'm sorry for them. And, they are suffering mental delusions. But everyone knows that this can't happen, that mammals aren't hermaphrodites, never have been, never will be. This does not pretend that intersex people doesn't exist. It doesn't even pretend that true trans people don't exist, on which there are reasonable arguments, right? But the idea that, oh, well, men can get pregnant. No, sorry, you know better. You know better, you always have. And now, the dancing around that's happening, like, oh, women's rights, but also if you feel like wearing lipstick, you're a woman. Wrong.
No, women's rights, but if you're convicted of a crime, you can declare yourself a woman and go to a woman's prison, even if the crime is one of sexual assault against women, right? Yes. So,
where you may end up impregnating one of the inmates, if that's the kind of person you are. And guess what? The inverse can't happen. Why not? Because claim all you want, you aren't a woman and therefore you can't get pregnant.
Right.
So,
the blue team has undercut its own
this
position.
Used to be our chickens coming home to roost at some level, and I am so angry at them. This is part of why we insist. Like, you know what? Our conclusions about much of what we would like to see in the world and how to do it, and our virtues and our worldview have not changed. And we have seen things just slide out from under us, and they kept the language, like they kept the words. No, you guys over there who destroyed our ability to talk about reality and men being men and women being women, and you can't go back and forth. That paved the way for a conservative part of the country to say, I'm not going to listen to anything you say now. I don't believe you if you're going to argue that actually women's rights are necessary and that we need to be able to have access to abortion because it is only in that way that some number of women are actually going to be able to end up being all that they can be in the world. It is really hard to take people seriously when they say that if yesterday they were saying, I feel like a woman today, so therefore I am.
So we have a problem in getting to that conversation, which has to happen.
Yes.
The problem is that however we got here, the dynamics of the argument are such that anybody who strays into the middle is going to find themselves picked off, sometimes by both sides, right? That this is a third rail issue. Yep. We've called it a buzzsaw issue. There's no room for anybody to express nuance.
Can I just say that I discovered this week what I should have known before is that the episode in which we talked about dodging the buzzsaw and we named it Dodging the Buzzsaw was one of the episodes that was redacted by YouTube and no longer exists on YouTube. So just extraordinary.
Yeah,
right?
I don't know what to think about this. I didn't even know that it had been removed.
Yeah.
But anyway, we should come back to that and find out what happened. It's very odd that seems to be gone. But nonetheless, the point is, I want to revive a principle, which I don't know when the last time I discussed it was, but I don't consider myself a centrist, right? I think I call myself a reluctant radical. And what I mean by that is I think only radical change can save our civilization and maybe our species. And therefore, as terrifying as radical change is, I don't think we have any choice about it. I don't want to be a radical. I want to get to a position where I can stand down my radicalness because I don't think it is safe.
You have said that you want to live in a society where you can be a conservative.
I want to live in a society so good that I get to be a conservative, yes. But for the moment, I'm a radical. I'm a progressive, and it doesn't mean I believe what most other people who use that label believe. In fact, I disagree with them about almost everything. But nonetheless, the problem is we need to have a conversation in the center, right? The center is not cool because that's where the truth is. The center is where we meet to discuss how we are going to govern ourselves when we don't agree. And we have to have this conversation. And frankly, all sorts of people who you and I like disagree with us on this question. They have what is, I think, at least in origin, a religious perspective that says, look, you don't have the right to end what would become a human being at any point after that process has started. You have the right not to produce such a person, but you don't have the right once the process is going to override it. I don't agree that that's likely to be right. And we can't govern ourselves that way. You know, as you point out, a huge majority of people disagree with that, right? There's the almost 50% in the middle who believe. Yeah,
it's more than 80% who disagree with that position.
Right. So we have to come to some agreement about, to the extent that there are going to be limits, what are they? To the extent that there are going to be protections, what are they? How can we minimize the harm of both?
I guess, I mean, that's maybe, I never said the numbers together, but maybe that's the most important take home from that Gallup polling is that as of the last poll on abortion by Gallup in 2021, more than 80% of Americans, they imagine, if the sample is accurate, felt that abortion needed to be legal, at least in some circumstances.
Right.
Or it should be.
And so, again, I want to point out this asymmetry, right? There are people who hold an absolute position on this, that abortion is never permissible, right? I don't agree with them. And I think that actually we can analytically point out why, even given most religious positions, that is not the logical endpoint of the question. But nonetheless, I respect the position, right? I do not respect the position on the other side, right? There is this ghoulish, anti-natal, hostile to babies, frankly, position on the other side that I find despicable. And, right, that asymmetry, I don't believe that that's my asymmetry in perspective. I believe that is actually an asymmetry in intent on these two sides.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's there have been many examples, but there has been sort of glee around the idea of allowing abortion all the way through the end of the third trimester, which again is to say right up until the moment of birth. And, that's not without precedent in other cultures. Other cultures have infanticide.
Yep.
We don't want to be those cultures.
Yep.
We have no interest in being in being those cultures. And yes, I am saying that in that regard, we are better than that. Right. We are better than that, and our cultural mores are better than that. And I'm not saying that we are universally better than people who also have infanticide as part of their culture. But in that regard, we are better than that. And we are better than allowing abortion in the third trimester unless there are extenuating circumstances, specifically the ones that come to top of mind are the life of the mother or the baby are at risk.
Right. Now, we do see on the other side politically, we see an indifference in the case of rape, for example. Right.
Yes, we
I
do.
believe we have just seen the governor of Oklahoma make an important announcement in which no allowance is being made for a rape victim. And in this case, I think it is obvious that this is A, political, and B, what would the term be? It
misogynistic.
Misogynistic and deeply inhumane.
Yes.
And the point that I would make is, you've already heard me say, I don't think that the amount of moral question with respect to terminating a pregnancy drops to zero even at conception. I think it gets low enough that we can say, look, there's plenty of room for you to make your own decisions. But what we can't do is say, well, actually, that zygote has, it's going to be a human being, so it is a human being, and negate the fact that there's another human being who's already very much a human being who has just suffered a terrible circumstance, and you're about to inflict a change that, turns that into a permanent condition on her. And so the point is, you have to do something with respect to the inherent rights of this woman who did not choose to be raped. And, and frankly, any reasonable God would take that position too.
Yeah.